Now that we have a shell, in lesson 8 we're going to explore the extensive Rayon block, texture and hatch library in order to add detail to our drawings and start illustrating the layouts. These tools will allow us to add details, materiality and context to our drawings, whether in plan, section and elevation. Using Rayon blocks is a really easy and simple way just to drop items into your drawings to help you start visualizing and illustrating layouts and activity within the space. By the end of this lesson, you will know exactly where to find all of these items to begin populating your drawings, how to import blocks, how to create blocks, how to edit blocks, and also how to start adding hatches, textures, editing, scaling, transforming textures and hatches in order to start bringing your drawings to life and adding that required level of detail. In the last lesson, I gave you a bit of a teaser into blocks and the block library. Now in this lesson, we're going to go into much more detail and really start to fill out the drawings, populate the drawings with blocks such as vehicles, furniture, people, plants, bathroom accessories, bedroom layouts, pretty much anything that you could think of, Rayon has it in a block form. And I'm also going to show you how you can create your own blocks by importing your own DWG, for example, and turning that into a block, or actually kind of elaborating further on my previous lesson and discussing how to create your own blocks by drawing them yourself. You can also edit blocks. You can pretty much do anything with the blocks, which is really, really useful to be able to start populating the drawings. So once again, I'm going to head over to the left-hand side and select the blocks tab. And as you can see, you've got my blocks and library. So any blocks that you import into your canvas, it will appear on my blocks. And the library of blocks that are available in Rayon are down here. So as I've mentioned, there's about 4,000 different blocks. And you can see here, you've got animals, you've got accessories, you've got bathroom accessories, you've got hot tubs and jacuzzis, you've got beds, you've got bedroom layouts, which is also a really interesting feature. So you can actually import an entire bedroom layout as a block, as you can see here. You've got carpets, chairs, coffee tables, dining room tables, elevators, gym equipment, kitchen equipment, laundry, anything you can think of. Rayon has it. It has 691 people, and I really like the people in Rayon, and also the plants really add a nice touch to the drawings as well. So as you can tell, the block library is vast, and it's a really great asset for you to really start populating your drawings and bringing them to life. Now we're going to start at this top right hand corner here, where we have this potential kitchen area, utility cupboard and toilet. So I'm going to head down into the kitchen layout. So as you can see, you can actually import an entire kitchen layout, which is really useful. And once again, to expand on my point in the previous lesson, every item that has a purple tag also has alternative views. So they have plans, sections and elevations. For example, this dishwasher here, if you select the purple tag, you can see that it's also got an elevation member, a section member and a plan member. So when you're working between section, plan, elevation, it's really useful to know that you have these alternative views to your access, and they're all linked together in the instance. So for example, you could import a kitchen layout like so, a 2-row kitchen, and we could drop that into place, but this isn't quite the configuration that we're going for. I think the kind of kitchen we want to explore is probably a back wall here of maybe a sink and some kind of cupboard space. Also a back layer here of cupboard space. So it's almost kind of built into the wall. And then potentially an island located in the middle. So let's find some casework. So if we scroll down, we'll do maybe a casework M with door. We're going to drag it and drop it into the model. And as you can see, it'll arrive like so. And I'm going to drop that into place, which is nice and ideal. So I drew this with a 600mm deep, which is a kind of typical depth of a cupboard, which you can see it snaps in like so. And just to check, if you wanted to check any dimensions of your drawings, and I'll go into more detail about annotating your drawings, but as a quick rule of thumb, you can head down to the dimensions tool at the bottom, select it, select one item, drag, select the other item, and as you can see here, yeah, we've got a 600mm kind of surface. And now we can copy and paste this along by holding Alt, dragging it across, holding Shift so it copies in a straight line. And we'll do the same down this side, so holding Alt, hovering over the corner, rotating it 90 degrees by holding Shift. And then we'll also drop these in here. So now we have a bit of storage, and we're creating this space in the middle here for a nice big breakfast bar or something. So we're going to head down here now, and we're going to try and find a sink. Maybe we'll drop in this double sink. Got a nice generous sink. The cupboard space underneath. And then now we're going to draw a breakfast bar. So I'm going to draw this by using the rectangle tool. I'm going to make sure that it's roughly probably about 1200 from the casing, 2.5 width and 1.5 height. Now I'm also going to add a fill to this because we're going to add some casing work. So let's make that fill white, and then we'll also make that probably a lighter grey, and maybe do 0.1 like so. And then we could add a induction hob or induction cooker, and we'll probably have that fairly central. And then let's add some stools. We've got some high stools, and maybe we could even just rotate them slightly to make it look like there's been some movement of some sort, so it doesn't look so rigid. And as you can see, this fill is sat below the chairs, and we ideally want it to be above, because you want to be able to see that the stools are underneath the breakfast bar. So what you can do is you can select the stools. You can either then head over to the layers and drop them below the rectangle that I've drawn, like so, or you can right click and you can do arrange and send backwards, and then you can keep clicking send backwards until it is behind the layer. Now the kitchen's coming together, and this probably block we could potentially change because it's got quite a solid fill around the edge, which doesn't quite match the graphics so far of the drawing. So we could select the block, we could hover to the right hand side. As you can see, it's got styles assigned to the block. We could edit the style, border and fill to maybe a grey that matches the breakfast bar. We can then change the black lines to the same grey, and as you can see, that now changes the colour, which just blends in a little bit better. Now I'm going to do the same for the utility room. I'm going to drop these in, rotate them, holding shift, dropping them into the corner. But what you'll see is that in this instance, we have two corner pieces, which, as you can tell, these square units are just going to look a bit weird being sat in the corner. It's not going to quite work. So this is where you can start editing the blocks and start working into them and making them fit your layouts. And an important thing to note at this point before we start editing this block is that when you have a block and you have multiple instances of that block in your canvas, when you start editing the block, it'll also edit all the other instances in your model. So you want to make sure that you, before you start editing a block, make sure you duplicate it, create a new, essentially creating a new type of that block, so that you're not going to change all of the other items that you have. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click my block, I'm going to head down to the bottom, and I'm going to unblock it. So this item is no longer a block. So what I'm going to do is drop this item down into this corner, and I want to make this corner piece essentially to follow the language of this room. So we've got a bit of an awkward kink in this location. So what I'm going to do is highlight over the item, double click into it, and you can see that you get these kind of transform points. You get these kind of points that you can start pushing and pulling and dragging. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to select one of the points, I'm going to drag it into the corner, and I'm going to do the same with this one, make sure that it's parallel. And what you'll see is, because this is a shape, it will have this point where you can kind of create a curve, but I'm going to drag this in so it aligns, so that we then have a straight line. And then as you can see, I now have an item that has been edited to my layouts. And then you can select that item and all of the components. You can right click and you can select block. So now you've created a block out of that item that you've edited. Additionally to editing blocks in the Rayon library and also creating your own blocks, such as the example that I showed in the previous lesson, you can also import your own blocks. So I'm going to very quickly show you how you can do that. So if you head over to the top left corner, click the three lines to the menu tab, come down to import, and we'll do DWG. Now I have an item here called lamp, which is going to be a lamp that I'm going to import. And once again, very similarly early on in the other modules, you'll have to select the scale. So I believe that's about 1 meter. We then select that, we click import. You'll then get the option of picking the insertion point, select into the canvas, and we have the DWG imported. And this DWG is automatically recognized as a block. And that block here is in the library. So you can drag that in. You can then start populating your drawing with the same lamp. Now, when you want to start finding something more specific in the block library, you can head over to the top left corner, type the search tab, and we could do maybe sofa. We'll do all these different kinds of sofas. There's a lot to choose from. Sometimes it's a bit overwhelming, like so, which will drop in. And we could potentially create a kind of space here that is for a living area. We maybe want to mirror that, so we're going to come down to the mirror tab, and we're going to draw the axis that we want the item to be mirrored from. So we now have that there. We could potentially have a carpet, and we'll rotate that once again. Make sure that we snap into the middle. We can maybe add a coffee table. Make sure that's central. And we're now starting to have a bit of a living room area, and maybe a TV we could drop along this wall here. Type in TV. And potentially a wall mounted TV would be pretty nice. So we can drop that in. Now moving into the dining room, we could add a dining room table. Some of these blocks are super elaborate, as you can see. If you drop that in, look at all the detail that comes with that. You've got a carpet, you've got the flowers and everything. It's pretty impressive. Saves you a lot of time, that's for sure, when you're creating your drawings. And I'm going to do a similar process of kind of pretending that there's a bit of movement. So maybe rotate this. And then once again, you want to make sure that the table is on top of the layer. So we want to drag that up above the crosshatch side seats so that it's above. We'll probably neaten this up. There's probably a bit too much activity going on here. Now, this is a long process of populating your drawings, adding people in plan. You've got lots of different types of people doing activities such as playing tennis, office person walking, people doing all kinds of different sports. You've got loads of different options. You've also got vehicles, which I think are also a nice one to add. And with some time working into the floor plans, you can arrive at something like this, where we have enough information to show a level of activity and the use of the space, but also not overwhelming the drawing with too many blocks, because as you can imagine, when you have so many options of blocks available, it's very easy to absolutely go crazy in your floor plans. For me, I like to find a nice balance. I don't like to overwhelm my plans too much, because then it just becomes quite distracting when you're looking at the floor plan. But as you can see here, we have some clear zones identified, and that's followed through from our initial zoning. You have this arrival point with the stair. We now have a kind of bookshelf here, which is a bit of a feature of this atrium space. We have a nice toilet with a maybe cloak cupboard. We have a kitchen with a utility cupboard, a utility room out the back. We've now got a dining room with a fireplace in the middle. So we've got some logs in there. We've now got a living room with a TV with these views over the landscape, with some outdoor seating, outdoor dining. We have some cars in the garage. So we've made sure to put a little sports car in there. This looks like a Ferrari. And when we go to the upper floor, we have the master bedroom with a nice kind of seating area. A guy walk-in to show some activity, a walk-in wardrobe, but dresser type space, a nice walk-in shower. So it's kind of a bit more of a wet room. We've got this seating area with someone sat having a read from the bookshelf. We've got this nice atrium space with glass balustrade in. We've got this smaller bedroom with a single bed and a shared bathroom and a bedroom at the end here. So you can see that when you're adding this level of detail to your floor plans, it really brings the drawings to life and it shows how these spaces are going to be occupied. Now let's switch our attention to elevation and section. Now when you start working in section and elevation, the best way is to come back up to your floor plan and start identifying the objects that you want to show in section 2. So for example, some of these items such as the plant, you can come up, you can select it, change the definition to the other members, and you can start copying down items to be able to begin populating your drawings. For example, when we look at section AA, this would be a significant feature of this section, this slicing through this reading space. We can select these items like so, we can copy them, we can come down to the section AA, we can paste them, and then we can now turn these into the elevation views. We drop that in. We can select this man reading. We can turn that into this man here. In fact, I'm going to use a different person. So we'll probably do maybe person reading. We want maybe this person looks like he's holding a book. And we'll drag him in instead. And we can do the same with the bookshelf. And we can start adding some books. And you can also import maybe some of your own artwork and turn it into a group or block. For example, you can drop maybe this group in here. You could add a little light as a little reading light. And you can really add some detail to your sections and elevations, working into them using the blocks and items, adding people, adding activity, and achieving something like so, where you can add your own groups with plenty of detail and elevation. You've got plants with their own shadows, which you can then head over on the right hand side and change the opacity of those shadows by coming down here. You've got people walking around outside. We've got lights dropping down from the ceiling, and the same for this elevation where you can show the bedrooms. You begin to get an idea of kind of the character of the spaces, the atmospheres by showing these windows and the kind of layouts, the internal layouts. These double height spaces, you've got the plant and you've got the bookshelf. And yeah, you don't have to go over the top crazy with all of the information and details. I like to just add a subtle amount of layouts, as I've discussed, just to give it an indication of activity, use of space. Now, the second part of this lesson is going to be switching our focus away from blocks and now towards zones and hatches. In lesson 6, you would have seen me discuss in some detail me using zones for kind of space planning and breaking up the massing. Now I'm going to show you how to use zones when we come to a more finished floor plan like this one, and how we can use a zone to essentially begin to add a hatch and a automatic tag, which will give you a room name and a square meter. So the same principles applies. We're going to head down to the element tabs tools at the bottom. So once again, you've got the wall opening, zone divider, and the zone. So we've discussed zones before, but this is going to be a case of showing you how to drop a zone into an enclosed space in your floor plans. So as you can see, when you select the zone tool, it is picking up on enclosed space. So any space that is being defined by walls. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select into that zone, into that space, and I'm going to head over to the right hand side, and we're going to change the fill to a hatch. So as I discussed earlier in the course, you have 4 options here. You either have a solid, which you can do a solid color, like red for example, and you can change the opacity like so. You can do a texture, where you can choose from kind of realistic textures that kind of give a more rendered appeal, for example, or you could use a hatch, which is what I'm going to use in this case. So I'm going to use a kind of a wood floor finish. So with that, I'm going to use this herringbone floor finish. And because this is already coming out a very strong feature to the drawing, I'm going to change the stroke to quite a light grey, and I'm going to drop the opacity down to maybe 40%. So we have something a lot softer like so. But as you can see, once again, the layer is on top. So we want it to be in the background. So I'm going to head over to my layer. As you can see, I've created a new layer called zones, and I'm just going to drop that down to the back. And this can be pretty much the back layer above the site plan and topography. And a really useful feature of hatches is that when you select your hatch on the right hand side in the fill tab, you can head down to the transform and you can begin changing the scale of that item. So for example, you could scale it right up so you've got some kind of much larger tiles. You could scale that right down to really small tiles. I'm going to keep it at scale number 1, but it's just a really useful way to demonstrate how you could potentially start editing the hatches by rotating them, changing the offset position, and it's a really useful way to start working into the drawings. And if you feel like the hatches that are shown in the default hatch styles on the right hand side, if you want to try and find some more hatches, there is a library of 100+ hatches over on this left hand side. If we head over to styles, come over to libraries, and you can see you've got all these different types of hatches that you can import into your model. For example, if you wanted to import different concrete textures, you've got all of these different textures available. You can change the view as cards, which I find to be a little bit easier to identify the textures. You then click the 3 dots, click import, and that will drop into your texture library. And so you have hundreds of textures and hatches to choose from. Now you can see that we have a hatch and a name applied with the square meter. So we can then go in and change this as the living, dining, kitchen. I don't like to go once again too over the top, so this would be as simple as it will get when adding hatches in floor plan. I don't like going over the top. I like my drawings being quite basic, black and white, to make sure that the information that's being shown is being shown correctly and that it isn't kind of being overwhelmed by hatches and other information like furniture, etc. But as you can see, it just adds that extra graphic touch, an extra layer of detail and information to the drawing, and also starts to add a bit of hierarchy. So you can start to see the furniture pop a little bit more. As you can see, they're solid white with the kind of the floor tiling in the background, and you can see it just starts to add a bit of hierarchy and a bit of a pop to the drawings. Now, in some instances where you want to add a zone, but you don't have an enclosed space, like this, for example, because we created our own group here for this door, what you can do is you can use the zone divider tool. So you can now select one point, select the other to essentially close that zone, to close that space. So these walls will be essentially room bounding, and we've now created that zone divider. You can then now drop that zone into that space, and you can do the same process. You could potentially do a more of a, I don't know, a concrete type texture or an oblique type texture with maybe red, for example. And you can start playing around with the different zones and hatches that you want to apply in plan. Now, this is one type of hatch that I want to add, but in order to add extra layers and extra information to the drawings, I'm also going to add shadows in both plan and section and elevation. And then I'm also going to add some more details in windows, for example, to show reflection in elevation and section, and just bring in the drawings to life a little bit more, adding some depth to the drawings. Shadows is a big one for me. I absolutely love adding shadows to drawings, and it really just adds that depth to the drawings, which obviously are very two-dimensional, and so the shadows just add that three-dimensionality to the drawings. Now I'm going to go to the top, create a new layer. This is important that shadows are now on top, and I'm going to use the polyline tool, and I'm going to start essentially picking a direction of sun. So for example, if we have sun coming in this direction here, kind of from the northeast down to the southwest, we can then begin to define some shadow. So this is quite a sketchy process. but it's essentially to show some kind of depth. And then what we're going to do is we're going to change that fill to a solid black, but then we're going to drop it down to maybe 60%. And we're not going to have a stroke because the shadow won't have a stroke, and we'll do the same here. We'll change that to black, drop it to 60%, remove the stroke, and I'm actually going to create a style out of this because we can begin to populate the drawings with these shadows and make sure that we have the consistent opacity throughout. So I'm going to save the style as shadows. Now, instantly by looking at this, it's already adding some depth to the drawing. And we could do the same around these kind of details where this is a kind of roof that is slightly protruding. And it doesn't have to be super accurate. This is purely up to you and how much detail you add to this and how accurately you draw it. I like to keep it quite sketchy. And by simply just adding a bit of shadow, the drawing is already popping a bit more, and it's becoming a bit of a graphic tool for the drawing too. And you can also start playing around with the different tones of shadows to make there a bit more of a hierarchy to show the different levels and the different volumes. And also to this roof, I'm going to add maybe a tile to show a bit of texture. And then we're going to change that stroke to a super light grey. Maybe we'll just drop the opacity down to maybe 20%. So you've got a really nice kind of subtle, and remove the outline. You've got a subtle hatch. And then at this point, we can also indicate the slope by adding a maybe subtle shadow. And now the roof plan, floor plans are starting to come to life. You can see the shadow adds much more depth and quality to the drawing, just making it pop significantly more. And now let's move into the sections and elevations where I think this really does help the drawings. So to describe some depth and some maybe cantilevers and overhangs and where these windows are kind of maybe offsetted, let's now just start drawing in some shadows. So for example, if we indicate that we have a bit of an overhang here, that is creating a shadow. We'll give that a shadow like so. And maybe for these shadows, we can make them a bit softer. They seem a touch too heavy. So we can maybe drop them down to 30% and create a new type called shadows, maybe 30%. We can then maybe add some depth to the windows to show a kind of reveal, and maybe these could be darker. And now we have a bit of depth to the window, and we can copy that across, and also working some rectangles into the internal spaces. And we can do the same on this one. Once again, it'd be quite sketchy. Like so. Take some time working through it. And in elevation, you could do the same once again, adding some depth to the windows, indicating some areas of these shadows that are being generated by the landscape and the various kind of overlapping elements. We could potentially add a darker edge to this overhang here, indicating an overhang. And there, by adding some simple shadow to the drawings, we have some depth, which is great for a 2D drawing. Something that originally looked quite flat, the shadows all of a sudden just add a bit more depth and layering to the drawing. Now the final things that we're going to add now is some textures to these elevations, similarly how we've done hatches on the roof here and on the ground floor here. We're going to add some textures to this elevation and then also add some details to this window to show some materiality, show some reflection, and once more adding that depth to the drawing. So the hatch that I'm going to use for this elevation is going to be a stone hatch. So if I draw my rectangle, so once I've drawn my square, I'm going to come over to the fill, I'm going to come over to the hatch, and we're going to find a stone hatch. That is going to add this one here. See what others they've got. Yeah, let's add this stone hatch, which I think is perfect for this scenario. So this is now starting to tie in the initial brief of responding to the local vernacular of Cornwall and the Cornwall stone. So we're going to use this hatch here. We're going to turn the stroke off. And once again, it's going to be a case of working through the colors to make it softer. Maybe drop that down to 80%. And that is much better. We can also scale this hatch up and down by coming over to the transform tab at the bottom. We could then scale this maybe to 2 to get more. Maybe that's slightly too big. Maybe we'll do 1.5 to get some kind of big chunks of stone. And then we can copy this across, scaling it down. As you see, as you scale the item, the hatch does not scale, which is really useful. So as you're copying this item throughout your elevation, it will remain the same. And in some of these instances where you have the window and the fill is going beyond, you can draw a rectangle and drop it between those details. And dropping it in between like so. So then the window's poking through. Now, to define these two volumes and two masses that are sat above one another in this elevation, as I've discussed very early on using the references, I thought a really interesting way of defining two zones is be able to have two contrasting languages, two contrasting materiality. So as you can see here, we've got stone at the kind of base of the elevation, which responds nicely to the landscaping and the integration into the landscaping, and it has that kind of natural response to the ground and landscape that we're working into. Whereas on this upper mass, I'm going to have a contrasting material such as timber, maybe vertical timber slats. So I'm going to once again draw a shape using the polyline. I'm going to trace, and then I'm going to look at using a hatch fill that is going to be vertical. And in fact, I'm going to change this to have a bit more of a batten appearance, not that. Yeah, that's much better. And then on the roof, we can show a thicker batten to show a kind of a contrasting language. So for the pitched roof, potentially we do something thicker, like so. The opacity 35%. And therefore you've got these three different languages that show these tiers and the different masses through the contrasting materiality. Now the final thing that I'm going to add to these elevations is a reflection in the windows. Now if you normally look at a window, it's not white as we're drawing it here. It's not clear, extremely clear. It's always got a kind of grey tone to it, a slightly darker tone, because of the reflections of the sun, and you can't normally see directly into the space. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw using the rectangle tool. I'm just going to make the glass pane grey, and I'm going to add a bit of a reflection by drawing maybe a kind of rectangle like so. Maybe make that white, maybe drop that 50%, like so. Maybe we could change the opacity slightly of this. But the idea is to show that materiality of the glass and the realistic tone and condition of the reflection. And what we can do is we can select these components, right click once again, we can group them and call it glass. And we can also populate these across the drawing, adjusting the aspect ratio for these larger windows, like so. Some of them you might have to do by hand by actually going into the group, ungrouping them, until we arrive at something like this, which as you can see, just adds that extra level of detail, reality to the drawing, and also a hierarchy once again. It just makes the windows pop much more, and in section, you can see that works really well. So as you can see, using the hatch tools in both floor plan, in roof plan, in elevation, in section, you can really start bringing your drawings to life, adding depth. Shadow is a major one for me. It's starting to show some materiality and the language that we're trying to communicate with the contemporary barn look. And the windows are starting to pop, which is starting to look good. And the windows are now helping the drawings pop. And so now they're ready to begin to start being annotated.